Welcome back for part 2 in our mini-series on manuscript preparation and submission. In this podcast, we'll go over what an example of electronic submission is like. We'll also run down the final checklist of things you need to do during submission. Finally, a brief word on how long this actually takes. This podcast is constructed under the assumptions that you've already selected your journal and that your basic manuscript format is already according to that journal's guidelines. If you haven't reached this step, stop. The previous podcast deals with selecting a journal, so consider reviewing that first. The first step after selecting your journal is to create an author profile. For many of you, you won't have a pre-existing one. You will need to enter your name, email address, and a mailing address or affiliation. As trainees, I would recommend that you use either your PI's office information or your general orthopedic office information. This is from my own submission that I made while on staff here, so I've used my own office information. You will also need to indicate classifications and whether or not you'll review for them. While you're a trainee, I suggest that you indicate no, but it's actually a very illuminating exercise, and you can get CME points when you're in practice. The next step will be creating the manuscript profile for your submission. Although you'll later make a title page and an abstract, they almost always want it up front as well. Some journals want a short, i.e. 50-character, running title as well. With taxonomy, open the menu and select as many as is reasonable and allowable. Keywords are actually fairly important, because these are search terms for others to use to find your paper. This is a whole mini-topic of its own. Take a look at what your reference papers have used to get an idea of what will fly. You will want some to be broad, some narrower, but nothing so specific that nobody else will combine those syllables in the same way that you have. For example, a paper dealing with rotational landmarks of the distal humerus for insertion of total elbow replacement could have keywords such as elbow, total elbow replacement, humerus, rotational profile, elbow reconstruction, or arthroplasty. You will next need to add your authors. You'll automatically be classified as the corresponding author. Don't change that, because it can mess up your ability to continue your submission. It is possible to change it later if you ask the publisher nicely and in writing. In this day and age, though, the responsibilities of the corresponding author are quite limited and usually do not extend beyond the submission and review process. Inasmuch as I would hope that this is not the first time you're looking at author and manuscript guidelines from your journal, now is a good time to review them. This is where you'll find the copyright transfer form, the conflict of interest form, instructions about acceptable graphic formats, instructions about cover letters, title pages, and so forth. As an FYI about graphics, most publishers will be happy to publish color online, but many will charge you for color in print, so make sure your figures can survive in both scenarios. You'll eventually make it to the file upload page. These folks at Journal of Hand Surgery nicely remind you to make sure your work is blinded. This rule will vary from journal to journal, but make sure that you know what it is for your manuscript. There are certain mandatory components and optional components. These are listed in the dialog box, and it reminds me I haven't uploaded them yet. In the final checklist, there are supporting documents that you'll need. The first is a cover letter. Unless the journal has specific rules, you need to include the manuscript title, the journal you're submitting to, the role of each author, funding, conflict of interest, and a gracious thank you. You really need only one of these in your whole life because you can adapt it for any purposes later. Because you've taken all identifying information out of your manuscript, it all goes on a title page. Again, there will be nuances between journals, but it needs your full title, the running title, the authors in order with their highest degrees listed, the place where the research was done, corresponding author information, disclaimer, and research ethics board information. This is an old title page, and I don't really think anybody cares about reprints anymore. Another thing most journals want you to do is to add continuous line numbering to your manuscript. This makes it easier for reviewers to note where they want changes. In Word, it's typically a function under paragraph or document formatting. In your final manuscript, all figures and tables with their legends are removed. The journal will specify where they want the legends to go, but typically it's at the end, either before or after the references. Then you just list them in the order they appear in the manuscript. So here's the final checklist. Unblinded title page, blinded line-numbered manuscript, cover letter, conflict of interest form, copyright transfer form, each figure or table in its own numbered file, and your keywords. Some journals require you to name or exclude potential reviewers in order to complete this submission. If this comes up, talk with your preceptor. This is a time-consuming and fiddly process, but there are ways you can help yourself. Since you now know what you'll need, you can plan. As I mentioned before, one good cover letter template will be reusable until the end of time. I create a folder for all the submission files, and when I finish something and it's ready to submit, I drop it in there. I sincerely hope you're using a citation manager, because formatting or reformatting references becomes unbelievably painful without one. See your preceptor about this if it's an issue. Get those copyright forms circulating early. Be aware if your journal wants all the authors to sign, whether they allow electronic signatures, or if you can sign on behalf of the team. Once you're uploading files, you can be relaxing or multitasking. When all is said and done, the submission program will create a PDF for you to review. They will force you to open it before you get the option to submit, but do check things over carefully. I've caught a few boo-boos over time, and it saves both time and embarrassment later. How long it takes depends on how well practiced and organized you are. My first few took quite a while to gather everything, and in those days, the graphics and uploading were run by the dinosaurs. These days, the physical submission takes about 1 to 2 hours once everything is ready to upload. I would budget at least a couple of weeks to get the various supporting documents sorted and the files prepared. Do be attentive to the rules, because most journals will bounce back manuscripts with formatting issues until they are fixed, and this is before you ever get to a reviewer. You can save yourself several weeks by being on top of this. Submission for publication is a series of many small steps and details. Care and organization will reward you by reducing hassle down the line. Be efficient and reuse what you can. In the next podcast, we're going to look at considerations with abstract writing.